Hello everyone and welcome back. So I've decided to make a quick change, only one thing. I changed one thing in the RBD setup. I plugged in something I already made from my previous setup to do a quick test of what we've done together. And this is what I have. I have the ground collapsing the way I want it to be, and I have this energy rippling and pushing all the RBD pieces. Now you could look at injecting velocity, obviously, but just a linear expansion, and then you mask that to drive some extra velocity that you copy into the pieces. But the problem if you do that is that the geometry won't have anything to collide with underneath, so it's not gonna look very natural. You will have more control maybe over how it's gonna work, but you're not going to be able to have collision geometry underneath. So with the one thing that I changed, this is what I get, exactly the same setup. And as you can see, it's almost there. The only part is hello everyone and welcome again. So I've decided to do a quick change and plug in something that I already made in the original setup in our current setup. And this is the result. I've plugged in one thing and this is what I have. So I have the ground collapsing as I want it to be, and then the ripple effect. And this is only by changing one thing. Now the way we could do this is we've started looking at how we could do the collapse by having a geometry underneath it that holds everything, but it deforms over time, and that will just create a gap underneath the surface which will make it fall. And this is how the actual nuclear explosion works. If you Google it, you will see that it makes a huge gap. It pushes the dust here and there. It creates a big gap of air, and then everything starts to collapse, which is what we're trying to achieve here. And then I have the energy, the force, that ripple force, which is very natural in this preview. And if you look at this part here, this part, you will see the ripple actually working really nice. You see it here, and then it's going to start propagating. It's going to push these pieces, and then because there's so much pressure, they're going to pop up, and that's very natural. And we could look at injecting velocity into this, but if we do use the velocity, we create some custom velocity and copy it, it's not gonna give us when the pieces falls up with that velocity. When it falls down, it's not gonna have something natural underneath. It's not gonna feel that the ground underneath it changed. So it will all be fake. This is not fake. It's everything we do is fake. But the sim is correct. We're not injecting velocity, something else is happening. So like I did with the collision geometry, this time I changed it to something else. And it's simming now because I wanted to show it live. But so this is the sim, okay? And I've changed only one thing. So before we had this gap, okay, which we could have animated to fall down over time, and that will cause the surface to fall down as well naturally, but it's not going to have the ripple. So what I've done is this. I have this geometry, which is a Voronoi piece, and it's doing this. So if I play, it's doing this. And this is similar to the SOP operation that we did, okay? It's not a sim, it's just I fractured the geometry, I used the grid, and that grid is deforming the RBD points, and then it has noise, and the noise is driving this point. And by just doing that and plugging that into the collision, I'm gonna template it here, or maybe let's view this and then template the RBD. It's hard to see. So by doing that, it's actually providing the RBD system everything it needs to behave the way we wanted it to be. Okay, so that's my approach. So a collapse, a controlled collapse, and then a ripple, but the ripple is coming more from the sim rather than the geometry. The geometry is just just pushing it to do this, and then the ripple is the actual result of the sim. So this is very simple. And with this system, I now have full control. I can control whatever I want. I can control the speed of the collapse. I can control how fast the pieces expand. I can control how fast they go up. If I increase the noise on that geometry, it's going to push them more. And let me open this up. If you look at this part here, the center is exploding. That's because the geometry underneath is actually pushing it too much. There's a big snap. And the second layer that is currently missing played a key role in damping all this force. So it's not just hitting this top layer. There's a protective layer underneath, which made it feel much more natural. So there's this layering, and then with the constraints and everything, it's going to feel very, very natural. So this is the idea. Whatever is going to happen underneath is going to create a force, push the geometry, but also provide a collision. So when these pieces come back, they're not going to come back to empty air. They're going to come back to something appropriate to collide with. And this is very important, because if we use something flat and if we injected the velocity, we're not we're not going to be able to have a proper collision after the pieces comes down. So this is what I did offline. I just plugged in, instead of this piece, I plugged in this geometry. I'm going to quickly show how it's made. We've already done most of this, and I'm going to do a separate video to go into it in more details. So it's a grid that it started with, and then I have same thing, a ramp like that, and then I have a point vault. I use the point vault because I can control the ramp a lot more using this. So now it's doing this. So this is just a surface, and then you can see a small ripple here, and it's all with a ramp that I'm doing. And see that small snap? Boom. That's what's causing the center in the main RBD to explode like that. Okay? And I wanted to have this ripple here and have it push up again, as if, you know, it fell down, and then something pushed it up again to replicate the ripple. At the same time, I have this noise dub version, okay, that I'm also blending in between. So not just this, as it goes down, once it reaches the point, I'm introducing the second noise up, and it's moving. And if I use this with a different version of the geometry, so this geo is is similar to the original one. It's probably using the same point. It's just a grid. I fractured it, and then I'm going to use a point vault. It doesn't really matter how many points you're going to have. They're going to affect the sim, obviously, if you're going to have just 3 blocks. But there's nothing that can go wrong with this. So you just have to have a lot of points and try it out and see how it looks. And then, I use the point deform, and this is what I have. This is my geometry, and that's what I'm using underneath the collision in my final sim. That's what I had here, and that's my approach. Now I'm going to show quickly the difference. We're still ahead of finishing this up. The final result is way more complex, but we're going to cover all of that in the next couple of videos. So this is the final geometry with the final RBD sim. And as you can see, as I play through, there's that wobble. And I'll be very honest, this wobble happened, it was accidental. I didn't plan for it. It just happened from the sim. I liked it. I didn't have the idea at the beginning to wobble the ground. I just wanted it to collapse similar to the references. But when it happened, I liked it. It felt like there's something underneath. I actually pursued this path to create some kind of subsurface scatter underneath with veins, as if some kind of lightning happened underneath the surface. But it didn't work out. So I just dropped it, especially with the lighting and all. It's not going to fit the visual. And so I dropped it and didn't pursue the glowing underneath path. And so that happened. I left it, and if I wanted to remove it, I'd probably just post-process it. I won't change the sim because I'm very happy with the sim. And as I play through, you can see we're getting these nice rings. This is all coming from constraints. So we're going to set up the constraints, and you can see there's a lot more clustering. So you can see these nice blocks are grouped together. We're getting these nice cracks here. And then what else? And then yeah, see this part, for example, it feels very natural. It's like a piece of bread separating, and then as the ripple happens, it's causing all these fractures to travel through. And then as the pieces come down, see this entire block, for example, here, as it comes down, it's going to separate into a few blocks, and that's very, very natural. So we're going to look into doing all this, and then next week we're going to do the upres, which is the portion for the spaceship where it's going to collide, and we need a lot more resolution there. So that's it. I'm gonna dive into this part here. Where is it? So this part where I did the ripple, I'm gonna explain what I did in these 2 point VOPs and how they're affecting the surface. We're gonna implement them from scratch, and we'll do that in the next video. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in a bit.